Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this virtual conversation with our current Critical Breaks residency artists, Kirya Traber and Sissi Liu. I am Aaron L. McKinney, Executive Director of High Arts. For accessibility, I will provide a visual description. I am a caramel complexion black male with a high top haircut with faded sides, connecting beard and goatee. I have on a white polo shirt, and I am sitting in front of an intersection of a white wall and an exposed brick wall. I must acknowledge the people and the land that High Arts office and studio space is situated on. We honor the Muncie, Lenape, and Wappinger people that cultivated the soil now known as East Harlem, New York. High Arts is in an exciting season of growth, and we hope that you will continue to join us either in person or virtually. You can find information about all of our exciting updates, programming, and opportunities by visiting our website at www.hi-artsnyc.org or on social media at HIARTSNYC. I never shy away from the opportunity to thank the staff of High Arts for their energy and expertise. Without this growing team, this work would not be possible. So thank you to Joyce, Brittany, Eleanor, Nicole, Issa, and when she isn't wearing her artist hat, she serves as our curator in residence, Kirya. I would also like to thank our ASL interpreters from First Choice Interpreting Services. This organization would not be able to continue its operations and programming without the wonderful support of funders and individuals like you. We appreciate you sharing your time and your financial resources with us. Again, visit www.hi-artsnyc.org. That's www.hi-artsnyc.org to make a financial contribution. I look forward to seeing you soon, either in person or virtually. Feel free to like, share, and comment as you enjoy this conversation with these artists. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you, Aaron. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to High Arts Virtual Artist Talk. My name is Joyce Pierce, and I'm the program manager here at High Arts. I am a light brown-skinned woman of African and indigenous descent. I have brown eyes and a medium-length brown locks that have cowrie shells on the ends. I'm wearing a white long-sleeve shirt and green rimmed glasses with colorful rings and necklaces on my fingers and neck, and I'm sitting in front of a dark forest green wall with hanging plants and photos of Black queer icons and legends. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to an evening of reflection and discussion with our current Critical Breaks artists in residence. Sissi Liu and Kirya Traber are the creative minds behind If This Be Sin. Set against the sultry backdrops of Harlem Renaissance nightclubs and old Hollywood of the 1950s, If This Be Sin is a musical work based on the life and legacy of Black queer and gender-bending creative icon Gladys Bentley. If This Be Sin spans from Bentley's formidable ascent to fame to her tumultuous choice to conform and marry a man in the 1950s, celebrating her riotous queer and gender resistance throughout. She was known as Harlem's King and the pinnacle of Harlem Renaissance performance, but her name had been overlooked in history for decades until recently. Traber and Liu's new musical gives life to the story that has too long gone untold. ASL translation is being provided for this evening's discussion, and I'd like to extend a warm thank you and welcome to our interpreters for joining us this evening. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to Kirya and Sissi. We're so happy that you've been with us the past few weeks as artists in residence and are excited for this evening's dialogue. Before we begin our conversation, I'd like to introduce Kirya and Sissi via a reading an excerpt from their bios that they've provided. Kirya Traber, pronouns she, her, is a nationally awarded writer, performer, and cultural worker. She is a collaborating artist with Ping Chong and Company and is curator in residence with High Arts. Throughout her ambitious performance and writing career, Kirya has continuously utilized her art for social change as a cultural organizer. Sissi Liu, pronouns she, her, is an award-winning musical theater specialist, composer, and multimedia artist who has created works for venues such as Carnegie Hall, Joe's Pub, Lincoln Center, Times Square Alliance, and the Juilliard School, where she trained in composition and orchestration. Her writing appears in leading academic journals and several edited volumes on musical theater from Oxford University Press, Routledge, among others. Welcome, Kirya and Sissi. Before we begin, I would like to offer a moment for us all to hold space for Bell Hooks, who has transitioned, and I think we can all agree has been an inspiration and life guide for so many of us. And I'd like to invite Sissi to share some quotes that have inspired actually some of the work in this piece, if this piece, excuse me.
Thank you so much, Joyce. I would like to share two quotes that inspired my writing. They're both from Outlaw Culture, Resisting Representations. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move against domination, against oppression. The moment we choose to love, we begin to move towards freedom, to act in ways that liberate ourselves and others. The function of art is to do more than tell it like it is to imagine what is possible.
Thank you, Sissi. And in the spirit of Bell Hooks, I would love to just check in with y'all and see, how are you today? How are you doing in this moment? And where's your spirit sitting right now?
I'm having a hard day. And I just got quite emotional thinking about the impact that Bell Hooks has had on me and what it means to lose another legend. And I'm sure she lived a very good life. I got to meet her at the new school when she had her residency. But one of the things that she was not shy about was naming work, labor, and we have worked so hard these last few weeks and years on this project. And there's so many ways that it's been really an uphill battle because of the outsider stories that we're trying to tell. And I am very, in many ways inspired and encouraged by what we've accomplished at High Arts, and I'm excited to talk about that tonight. But right now, today, feeling my Blackness, my queerness, my womanness, and the things that adds to my journey and my health. It's been a hard day. Hard day.
Well, I'm sending you like the biggest socially distanced hug possible in this moment. Thank you for being honest and being vulnerable in this moment. Thank you. And I'm sending you love. Sissi.
I'm sending you love as well. And it's a very hard day for me too. The world is a lesser place without Bell Hooks. I've been very inspired by her as a queer artist of color. And the love that she offers, I hope to transfer those love from me to the works that I do. And she inspired me to work in a Black musical as a non-Black person. She gave me that strength, which I'll talk about later. Yeah.
Wow.
So, sending you love and compassion.
And just gratitude for Bell Hooks, because that just made it so real. Like just talking about it and hearing those quotes just made it so real. Ooh, let's take a collective. But we're so happy to have you both, icons in your own right, in my opinion, brilliant creatives in your own right, in my opinion, here. And I think it's really important, before we dive into discussing your residency, that the folks who don't know you get to know a little bit more about you and your creative partnership and how it came to be. When we last spoke, I know you mentioned that your creative partnership has been really beautifully aligned in so many ways, which is wonderful. One being that Kirya, I believe your name means fortress, and Sissi, your hometown is like the translation, the literal translation is fortress. Like, so that's one way. I think your partners have like the same initials. So besides being like written in the stars, like, and already preordained, how did you find each other? Yeah, creatively and in the world.
Sissi, why don't you give it a whirl? The big version of the story.
Sure. So when I met Kirya, I had already written some small pieces, musical theater pieces, and I was getting ready to write a full-length musical. And I had finished writing my dissertation, my doctoral dissertation, and the subject was on minoritarian performance, which I dedicated close to 10 years researching, writing on. And I was also very much inspired by Afro-Asian solidarity for many years. And I was getting ready to teach a class on theater for social change. So all of these things come together when I was about to meet Kirya at Pinchong Company Summer Institute, which is the best place to go to for community theater training. And Kirya was this charismatic and eloquent facilitator for the Summer Institute. And we met, and Kirya told me about Gladys Bentley. And that was the beginning of it all.
Yeah, that's great. And then so I'll fill in my part of the story. I unlike Sissi, I was not a musical theater artist. I was a theater artist. But I first discovered Gladys Bentley even before I identified as a theater artist. I was actually a poet, and I was commissioned to write a work out of an archive in which she was one of the few Black individuals inside that archive. This was the San Francisco GOBT archive, and most of it was started in the 1970s onward, and was mostly focused on white men at the time, which is, an issue of gay history and American history generally, until, more and more of us are putting our stories forward. So she just happened to be in this archive. I was commissioned to write a piece from an archive. I happened to have an article on her because one of the co-founders of the archive had written his master's thesis on her. So it's just a coincidence. And I put in Black Harlem in the search, and there she was. And it felt like destiny I'll say more about why Gladys Bentley spoke to me so much. So I had written, by the time I met Sissi, I had written poetry about Gladys from this commission. And then I became obsessed, and I continued to write poetry, and I wrote some solo performance in which I spoke about her or performed myself and her. And then I wrote a play, and I had started to dabble with plays and music. Actually, most of my plays were, even though I was not a musical theater person, I just kept finding myself writing songs. So I wrote a play with music about Gladys Bentley, and it just wasn't enough, because she, as you'll come to find out, is such a larger than life personality, had such a magnanimous presence in the world. She needed magnitude and spectacle in the work that represented her in this time. And I was like, I have to write a musical. Never done that. I need a composer. I don't know. And right before, so I spent a couple of months asking around, anyone know any composers? Of course, a lot of people do in New York, but it had to be the right fit. And a couple of meetings didn't work out. And I thought, I think I need to put this down for a while. Either I'm going to find some inspiration and really just beat the pavement and find my composer in a little while, maybe in a few months, or the divine will bring someone into my life. I said that facetiously. And then I went to facilitate the Summer Institute, and I introduced myself and my work as a part of the Institute. And in a break, Sissi beelined across the room towards me very quickly and said, "Hello, I'm a composer. I heard that you need a composer for your musical." And I was a little bit taken aback at first. But then we met, and right away we started to discover this chemistry between us, that even though we hadn't known each other at all before, there's something about when we talk about the work. A lot of it has to do, I think, with our shared feminist, queer, womanist of color lineage that we both are studied in. But also there's something in the way that we just meet as creatives that has that, impossible to name energetic spark. When we have time carved out, we just make and make and make. And it happens every time without fail. And that was in 2018, I think.
18.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, I think I discovered a little bit about Gladys Bentley around the same time that you discovered her. My African-American theater and performance class teacher at my PhD program wrote a book about Harlem Renaissance performance called Bulldagger, Pansies, Chocolate Babies, Performance, Race, and Sexuality in Harlem Renaissance. And one chapter is devoted to Gladys Bentley. But at that time, I didn't write anything about Gladys until I met you.
Yeah. And that chapter quotes from the Eric Garber, the scholar that I found his thesis. So
yes,
there was very, very little that existed on Gladys Bentley at the time, about 12 years ago or so, or what have you.
Yes. And later I found out my dissertation that I wrote on Manutarian performance. It's a system I developed called shapeshifter consciousness. And I later found out that Gladys is the epitome of my shapeshifter consciousness.
I can totally see that. I don't think
yes.
That. I do want to say to the at-home audience, though we are using, academic language, we are not writing an academic paper with music. We're writing a musical.
No, not at all.
Don't be fooled.
And Joyce can attest. Yeah, Joyce was in the room and can attest that all of our songs are sexy.
Yeah. Make a little taste later on during the conversation so they can be the judge. But I love, there's two things. I love that, Kirya, your response to your research and like the magnitude that you found Gladys like living in their glory is like, I need to write a musical about this. And like, that's how you were inspired. That's absolutely phenomenal. And also the second thing, like how the spirit of Gladys was kind of like uniting both of you, and how your own individual touch points have like created this wonderful masterpiece that you're working on now. So just seeing Gladys guide you guys together is kind of awesome. I would love if you could share a little bit about what your creative roles are in If This Be Sin.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so as a playwright, when you jump over to the musical theater world, they change the words on you. Instead of saying playwright, they say book writer. Instead of a play, they call it a book. I'm actually not sure the history of that. I'm sure Sissi does. So I am writing the book for the musical, which will be the words that are spoken and not sung. And we're also collaborating very intently on the lyrics. So all the words I have my hands on in some way in the piece that will live eventually. And then also for this workshop, I directed a little bit. I don't intend to fully direct the piece, but I do really enjoy getting to sort of direct performances and be involved in the performance of the work as well. But ultimately, I'd love to find a director collaborator as well.
Yes. I'm the composer lyricist, and as Kirya mentioned, a lot of our songs are the lyrics are written by both of us, and it's a very collaborative process. We even decide what is going to happen in the plot together. So,
yeah, we have many outlines, and I have to say, like, it's like I said, I had started writing songs a little bit here and there before I started writing musical, but it was very much like inspired by like blues and roots music and sort of like simple like A-B forms. I'm learning so much about music so rapidly, and it's really, really fun and a great challenge and a stretch to like think about like songs that I was even thinking today, Sissi, like there's songs that we did a pickup recording session today, so we got to hear them again. There's songs that Sissi wrote the first draft of early on, and I had like one or two thoughts, and now there's songs that we've written more recently where it's like we're in it together, really shaping the lyrics, and I have such a faster facility with like thinking about lyric over music, and it's a really interesting, fun growth process.
Yeah. And this is like a unique method or like means by which the collaboration is happening, because for folks who are watching who don't know, we're all in different spaces right now, not just physically like in different dwellings, but in different states.
Yeah.
So that actually ties into the development of this work, because this was supposed to happen before the pandemic. You were supposed to be in residence at High Arts. So how has like the pause that was created by the pandemic and all the spaces that have been in between both of you, has it influenced the development of If This Be Sin? And what was that pause period like for you creatively, and where you find yourself now?
Yeah, in April and May of 2020, I was set to be at High Arts and Kennedy Center for a couple of development residencies. And we had come off of, in 2019, we had a really successful workshop of the musical at JAGFest in Vermont, which is a Black theater festival. So we were really excited to get back in the room with actors again a year later, which seems like a long time, but in musical theater land, things take a while, but it was a long time, and we were really excited to get back in the room, and also to have even more support, to have 2 residencies and, you know, really a place to work. I really thought like that was it. And then from there it was going to take off, and I was basically at the precipice of a cliff, and then the pandemic revealed the cliff, to many of us, to all of us. I early on, before most of my peers, had my little existential crisis about the future of my career, and thought, oh, I'll never work again. It's all over. Like, I'm talking like March 31st. I was like sobbing into my hanky. Other folks, I think it wasn't until like May or June of 2020 that they were like, oh no, it's really not back. What happened for me is that even though I'm an artist, you know, you read my bio, you look at my work, like I'm quite a principled maker. I always pursue the stories of the underrepresented, undertold. Most of my work is drawn from, if not direct personal experience, like other Black, queer, etc., throughout history. So I'm not necessarily chasing commercial success, but I was really reliant on institution, as many of us were, to feel like I could be valid as an artist. And then what the pandemic revealed was the fragility of our arts institutions. And quickly then, after my little existential breakdown, I then had to return to, why do I make? And in this period where I could make and make and make and not have it be seen, it sort of almost brought me back to an adolescent sense of making. Like, I've been making work since I was a teenager, and, you know, living in the rural Northern California and then Bay Area partially, like nobody was seeing anything I was doing. It was just me. It was for me and the trees. And so returning to that sense of isolation as an artist, not that I desire isolation, but reminding me that at my core, there is a will, a necessity to make that is about writing myself. I would say writing as in writing, but also writing as in upright, writing my internal sense of self, coming to a one with myself. I mean, in addition to bell hooks, I'm really inspired by Audre Lorde, and the quote that I often quote of hers is, if I didn't define myself for myself, I would be crunched into other people's definitions of me and eaten alive. And I remembered what it is to pursue so voraciously my relationship with myself through my art. And then I could say, oh, right, I remember now. I go to institutions to say, do you want to help with this? No? Okay, then I'm going to keep it moving. Not the other way around. Not institutions present opportunities for me so that I may make, so that I may be relevant, so that I may have a voice. Da, 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 da. No, me, I have a reason, something that's compelling me. And I have community, colleagues, friends who have the same questions, and we wrestle with them together, and we'll make them as the apocalypse happens around us. And then if and when there's more stability and resources available, we'll take them. Thank you. And that completely changed the way that I was thinking about making, both on a pragmatic level, but also the nature of the work. Gladys herself, the reason why I'm so drawn to her is she was an entertainer. Like, I would say core to her identity, it would be like Gladys Bentley, entertainer, and then everything else afterwards. Part of that is also the time period, being so identity centric, Black, queer, woman, da da da. That's much later in the 20th century. She's early in the 20th century before that became the central politic. But also she started making music professionally at the age of 16. And she was making work that was, for those who have never heard of Gladys Bentley, she was fat, Black, masculine. She wore suits, top hat, coattails, cane, and publicly had relationships with women. And this was in some ways like exciting and celebrating the Harlem Renaissance, but even so was beyond the pale, in the blue, if you will. It was pushing all these boundaries and limits, and was a part of her entertainment. Like, it was, she lived and showed and lived and showed and lived and showed. And she ultimately had to then wrestle with the changing times around her, which was more World War II, McCarthyism, the pink scare as well as the red scare, people literally being denied employment, thrown into jail in some cases, just for being suspected of being homosexual, etc. She went from being celebrated for having these fly suits and dancing drag queens behind her, to having to have a permit to wear pants. And I was fascinated with her own tug of war, struggle, way to push through and stay an entertainer, to live her calling. The musical I was writing before was so much about her battle with institutions and really whiteness, to put a name to it. And I realized I don't care as much about that anymore, as much as I care about the people that surrounded her who were doing the same. The people that were her fans and followers regardless. And maybe the people that even said, when she eventually started to conform publicly, wouldn't even say, I don't know what you're doing, Gladys. And so the tenor of the musical changed, and we wrote new songs in response to that, and changed some of the lyrics in response to that. And the outline for the book is shifting because of that. So much has changed because of this pandemic.
And it's amazing that, like, personal expression, and I love how you said sense of self, was key to the development of If This Be Sin, because of like the space that the pandemic kind of like allowed and held for you creatively. And I think If This Be Sin is like a beautiful dive into the intersections of identity for Gladys Bentley, like you just described. Can you both share how the intersections of each of your own identities has inspired or influenced your creative process for If This Be Sin?
So I would like to start. As a non-Black person, I was actually, at the beginning, I was quite nervous. Kirya and I had this discussion before, and Kirya is extremely open, gracious, and welcoming. And I am very honored and humbled to add another layer of minoritarian experience to this musical. And I was thinking more about life and death after this pandemic, and my creative role as a composer lyricist and as a person of queer person of color. So during the pandemic, I had a baby, and I had a death in the family. So I've been thinking a lot about the evanescence of human life and the immortality of art that's made through love. And If This Be Seen is a project of love for me. I fell in love with Gladys. And I was, from the first moment, I was profoundly connected with Gladys. I was drawn to her ambitions, her struggles, her modes of survival and resistance and art making. And I want Gladys to be immortal, to be immortalized through this musical. And I was thinking of the entire human life, how people at their deathbeds remember only songs that they loved, scenes or words that they read from a play or from a film, memories of their favorite person in the world. And I want to write songs that people think about on their deathbeds. And in that way, I want to immortalize Gladys.
Sissi. Like my heart just exploded. That was so beautiful. Oh my gosh. So can we actually dive into your composing process? I would love to hear like what's your composing process like, and what are some of your musical influences?
Yeah, I'll be so happy to talk about that. So let me begin by saying that I was using some academic language before, and this musical is so entertaining. It's not academic at all, and I was actually questioning my own role as a scholar as well, because I felt like art could have so much more power sometimes than academic essays. And I've written so many essays, but I think a musical is so much more powerful than just writing an academic essay about Gladys. So I wanted to the best of my ability, I want to give life and to the music. But before I start writing songs, I still put on my scholarly hat and I do a lot of research. And as a historian, as a theorist, and so for me, I've looked so much into the blues and jazz in the 30s, 20s, 30s, early blues, soul, swing, and jazz in the 40s, 50s, and a lot of gospel, early rock. So anything that's popular throughout the 20s to the 50s, I have researched, and I have made a lot of folders so to record my musical influences. And what I do is I take these source materials and I let them simmer, and I come up with sometimes melody first, sometimes words first, sometimes both at the same time, and I work with them. Sometimes it's the best thing that I think this is it. It doesn't need reworking. Sometimes I wait a few days to see whether the melody sinks in, whether the harmony sinks in. I want to give it time to make sure that it has what I call hit quality, And that's something that I have researched in for many years now. It's hit songs and what makes a song a hit song. This is something David Henry Hwang calls the hidden mechanism, the hidden formula of a hit song. And I've written about it, and I practice it as well. So I take my musical influence. I was listening so much to composers and singers of the era. I was listening to Cab Calloway, Nat King Cole, Billie Holiday, Louis Armstrong, Ray Charles, Sarah Vaughan, and Ella, of course, and Sam Cooke, and lots of wonderful stuff. And I wanted to give the old elements a contemporary spin. I wanted to sort of translate the archive into something more immediate, more here and now, with the hit elements that I am conscious of. Yes, I'd be happy to hum tunes if you like. I'd be happy to share. Yeah.
Yes, I know. Yeah.
I was actually thinking, Sissi, I would love to do a comparison between the one Gladys Bentley song that we know the words to, the Alice Blue Gown, and If This Be Sin.
Okay.
And
Love
maybe, so maybe we could do a little bit of sharing of that.
The floor is yours.
So just some background. So most of her work, so there are some recordings of Gladys Bentley. If you like search, I think sometimes they get taken off depending on who owns them, but at some point on iTunes or Spotify, there was some Gladys Bentley. And that's recordings that she made early in her career when she was trying to be a blues woman. She was like trying to follow in the steps of Ma Rainey and what have you. And it didn't work. People were not interested. And what she really liked to do was take popular songs of the day, which were mostly Broadway show tunes, and turn them into raunchy ballads. And do this and it was much less about like original sort of like stories of her own life as it was about poking fun at satire and also like sexual exploration and play. Her shows were loud and raucous, and when she was playing in smaller clubs, she would go into the crowd and do a lot of crowd work where she'd flirt with the women, and celebrities, white celebrities, would come up just to be like touched by Gladys Bentley and be like, oh my God, I'm so scandalized. So it was a whole show, right? It's a whole situation. So none of that was recorded because of the censor laws. It was against the law to record such a thing. You could literally go to prison. You'll hear "Shave 'Em Dry" by Lucille somebody is like one of the few of these like dirty, sexy songs, but mostly a lot of stuff wasn't recorded. So there was a song called "Sweet Little Alice Blue Gown," which was a Broadway show tune sung by a white ingenue. Who was, in her little blue gown, my sweet little Alice Blue Gown. Gladys took that song and turned it into this song. In my sweet little Alice Blue Gown, that bastard, he taught me to brown. I was bashful and shy when he opened his fly. When I saw what he had, Lord, I thought I would die. And he said, dearie, please turn around. And he shoved that big thing up my brown. He tore it, I bore it, Lord, how I adored it. In my sweet little Alice Blue Gown.
Yes!
So, as you can hear, quite filthy. But for our musical, because we want all original music, so we have the rights to it. And so Sissi is writing music that is in the spirit of that. So Sissi, I'm wondering if you want to do a couple of measures of sin. I think you should particularly read the one about I Have Driven Up the Hills, but it's up to you.
And just for context, while Kirya and Sissi have been in residence, the music of If This Be Sin has been like in everyone's head on staff. So like if you need background vocals, I'll be on mute, but I'm backing you up.
Great.
Take it away, Sissi.
So I'm actually looking for the lyrics in the folder.
let me put it in
Yeah.
you. Did that go through? A little technical.
Oh, it says I need access.
Oh, I'll give you access.
Welcome to 2021.
Oh, it says you have access. Or maybe do your sign
Oh,
up.
I do. I was using Chrome. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So, yeah. So I have driven up the hills. I have cropped it up the back. I have tasted seafood around the world and smitten down the sack. I have shaken up the heavens. I have woken up the dead. I have started parties down below and scared a holy Fred.
You gotta sing it.
That's gonna be too dirty.
No, sing it.
Let me.
You can start wherever you want.
Okay. I have driven up the hills, I have cropped it up the back, I have tasted seafood down around the world and spitting down the back. If this be sin, you'd love my sin. If this be sin. Yeah, you can hear definitely blues and influence and gospel. Actually, I use the boogie woogie feel rhythm.
And it becomes a call and response where we get everyone to shout, "I love my sin."
I love my sin. I love your sin. I love to sin. Yeah.
Oh my God. I
And
love it.
nothing heavier than my body. There's nothing heavier than my body. My stroke is fine, my shape is hefty. It's nothing heavier than my body. It's nothing heavier, it's nothing finer than my body, than my touch.
As we said, all our songs are sex songs. But actually would love to give some context to that song, Heavy. So as I mentioned, I had written a lot about her, and my first work about her was poetry. And I wrote a line. And so something about Gladys, like I said, she was a fat woman. And that was something that was a part of her, the way she was described by others. And then she had to talk about and justify on her own when she wrote about herself. If folks follow High Arts online, you'll see that there's an article that she wrote for Ebony magazine, "I Am a Woman Again," which as scholars, we believe is apocryphal, as in the stories she's telling in there are not true, that they're actually stolen from a novel that was popular when she was young, that she was telling them in order to sort of fly under the radar in McCarthyism and sort of become a good American again, da, da, da. However, there's a lot of interesting material in there if you read between the lines, which we love to do. And one of the things she talks about is being heavy and being fat and being and how heavy she got in her life. And I'd written about that in comparison. So I didn't speak explicitly to why I connect to her identity other than being queer. I also am gender non-conforming, gender queer, gender variant in my life. I use she, her pronouns, but I don't consider my gender to be singularly one thing. And there were times in my life when I was visibly genderqueer in ways that got me a lot of negative harassment and a lot of exotification, a lot of things. And so when I found Gladys, this person who was also visibly different physiologically, like both a spectacle, something to be exotified and something to be shamed, I thought, oh, there's a kindred spirit, though I'm not a fat woman. So I wrote a line, "There's nothing heavier than my body." Sissi saw that, and in her brilliance thought, with our politic, right, we want to uplift this experience of body, not what it's made of by others, but what we make of it for ourselves. And she said, what if instead of it being a sad song, "There's nothing heavier than my body," it was her seduction song? And I was like, ah! And we listened to some sexy R&B, and it's this very pulsing, slow build, also choral, seduction, entrancing number that is a big woman saying, "There's nothing heavier than my body, and lucky you."
Yeah.
And I'm really, really happy with that song.
Yeah, it makes the whole, like, you literally get transported once that song starts playing, and you just feel like it's taking you in like the most sexy, yummy way possible. So mission accomplished, absolutely. I would love to dive into more about how some of the other songs have come to life from If This Be Said. Your choice, if you want to start with A Little Gratitude or maybe A Place We Call Home, wherever you want to start.
Let's start with A Little Gratitude. So I started writing that song when I was actually stuck in China. um, it's a fight between Gladys and her manager Barker. So I wanted to use a dance form, and I chose tango. So the music I came up with very fast. It took me about 2 days. And the lyrics was so hard to fit into the tango music. It took me about a month or so to put words to fit the words into the music that I had written. And a year after, Kirya and I were looking at that together, and Kirya is thinking, well, Barker is having a lot of attack, whereas Gladys is mostly defensive, and she took on. Do you want to go from there?
Sure, yeah. And I will say one thing that's fun that we do that I've heard other composer, book writer duos is that Sissi will say, okay, what's this song about? Can you write a monologue about it? And so I wrote a couple of like really shitty monologues, sorry, excuse my language, really funky monologues that then Sissi uses inspiration for lyrics. So then she writes this draft of lyrics that fits really really neatly and nicely over the music. But again, like it didn't quite get the story, right? And that's my area, right? I'm the one who's really obsessed with the story of Gladys. No, we both are, but I'm the playwright, right? So then I'm like, okay, how do we get this so that, like I said, like Sissi said, I was really concerned with that they had equal footing, that Gladys wasn't just being taken, because it was also a really good song. I wanted to give her some good lines. So we were at Residence in Kennedy Center, and I took half a day, and I rewrote 80% of the lyrics, thinking about, like, some of them just tweaked, but some of them like really just changed, but keeping in the same, as close as I could to the structure that Sissi had provided, and trying to keep the spirit that we both agreed to, but again, like giving more of a ferocious intent to our lead. And I again tried to keep up the structure, but I'm not a musician, so I was like, I know a lot of this doesn't fit. So then we went back together, and with the proverbial fine-tooth comb, line by line, thinking about period appropriate language,
Yeah.
thinking about what a white man of the era would say versus a Black queer woman. We're like word for word, but syllable by syllable, because it's got to fit over the music. I will say, I think we did a very good job. I call it an A-. It probably needs another pass. Our singers were heroic in singing
Yeah.
it this
A+, A+.
But we'll continue to smooth it a bit so it's not quite as to sing.
Yeah.
But it's pretty good.
It's such a fun song.
Very intense too. Very
Yes.
intense. Like you can feel the tension. It just literally explodes out of it. Yeah, amazing.
When I initially wrote it, I was thinking Gladys was indicting the public more than attacking Barker. So Gladys was speaking to the public more than to Barker. And then now it's really head to head. And yeah, it's really fun. Maybe we should hum a part of it.
That's all you. That melody is hard for me to until I'm hearing it, and then I sing along.
You ought to show me, baby, a little gratitude. I've had enough of all your ungrateful attitude. You ought to, you ought to, you ought to, you ought to show me a little gratitude.
Yes, this is the best artist talk back ever officially. Sissi, you have made this. So good. So that process, very different, I understand, from A Place Called Home.
Yeah, so well, not so much different, but like right on the heels of that. So that was in a week in Kennedy Center, and then the very next week we were at Thanksgiving happened, and then we're at High Arts. And mostly the material, we wanted to be ready with material when we got to High Arts, because at High Arts we got to work with artists, which was amazing. And so we had 6 actors, 6-ish musicians, and we recorded demos. So we wanted to be ready to rehearse, but we had this song that we had sort of started the week before that we were still interested in. And that was in the spirit of this new change, just sort of like, who's the community around Gladys? We were calling it the community song. And then we were sharing like party songs of the era and now, and sort of like, what's the spirit of a song that makes you want to dance? Maybe a slow dance, maybe a fast dance, playing around. Sissi came up with a melody. And then I had written, again, some like silly words, and she like took that and like rewrote a draft of lyrics, and instead of it taking like a year and like days and it was like 3 hours.
Yeah, it was 3 hours.
And my inspiration was looking at Langston Hughes collected rent party cards. So in the Harlem Renaissance, people would have rent parties, and people still have rent parties, but they were called rent parties, where people would come invite people over to help them pay their rent. So you pay a charge at the door, and I sell that to the landlord. And people would design little party flyers like you do on Instagram now. You like, come to my party. It's a picture of you and your like friends in your car or whatever. And they did that without the pictures, just with words. And they had all these really funny, silly slang vernacular of the era. And we tried to get as much of that in as we could. Our favorite is the bridge, which is grinded
like the old Dutch mill.
Right, that's the middle. So it's da 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 da. Anyway, grinded like the old
like
Dutch mill. Had us in stitches.
Hop until you drop.
So anyways, that happened so much faster because we built this muscle and this process.
Yeah. When we when we really have the spirit, we go like that. We just it was so fast. We wrote it in like 2-3 hours.
Yeah.
To the place where our cups stay filled and our feet are lighter than hair. To the place where we dress our best to impress a newfound affair. To the place where we stay all night, but we never leave the dance floor. It's a place we call Joe's on 134. Just to give you a sense of how cheerful this song is.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of the dynamics of your process. It's wonderful. We are running out of time, so I think this might be my last question for y'all. But I hope that it actually allows space for some of the other questions that we didn't get to. So Gladys clearly understood the gravity and importance of shaping one's own narrative as a Black queer woman in 1950s. And she took, as you said, very intentional measures to leave the imprint that she chose for people to have of her life and her story all these years later. If This Be Sin has, in its own way, begun its own process of making and shaping its imprint as a musical and artistic work. How is that process going? A little like moment for y'all to reflect on this residency and for that imprint in the future. What's next? Either whoever feels led.
think it's going well. We had a pretty specific goal in this residency, which was to get some things recorded with really talented voices singing them, which is so we can continue to share the work and hopefully get more supporters. I think what we didn't work on was the book, the script. And I have a lot of questions for myself about how to shape this story with the new impetus that I feel, and dealing with the legacy she left in this essay about herself that has all of this apocryphal, interesting, complicated politic in it, and then what we think as queer scholars looking back on it, and then also like what feels like this is, so one thing we're not doing is like restructuring the American musical. We're actually very much like dabbling in the form of the American musical and enjoying that form, and putting in its center a character that would usually be a side character. Someone who would just come in to do a band number or just be like a mammy is the lead. We want to do that for the people who have for years loved musical theater and not seen themselves. And we believe that those who do see themselves in musical theater will be delighted to see this version. So we don't necessarily have a mission of like explaining Black queer history to the uninformed as much as we do like demanding the attention by writing something that's just so compelling you can't help it. I don't know, that sort of was a roundabout answer for your question, Sissi.
Yes, which y'all have done, which y'all definitely have done. Sissi, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, I want to add on that by saying that there's still so many things I want to explore, and that I think Gladys deserves. There's so many song forms that I haven't used, employed in there, and there's so many hit song elements that I haven't tried yet. There's just so much I still wanted to. We've written 10 songs at this point, and we're thinking maybe 20 songs. Yeah, there's so much to explore. I can't wait.
Well, we can't wait either. Thank you so much for taking time and space to even create the way that you have, and to hold space this evening. And in the spirit of Gladys and Bell Hooks, I'd love to end with a Bell Hooks quote that says, the one person who will never leave us, whom we will never lose, is ourselves. And just thank you, Sissi. Thank you, Kirya. Thank you again to our interpreters, and thank you to all who have joined us this evening. Sending you all peace, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.